Good morning, everybody. This is Tim Johnson, Director of the State Center for Geographic Information and Analysis and Chair of the conference. I'd like to welcome you to the first virtual edition of the conference after many years of seeing many of you in person. This conference is sponsored by the North Carolina Geographic Information Coordinating Council in cooperation with the North Carolina Department of Information Technology and the Carolina ESInet chapter. 1 year ago this month, we were poised to bring the conference back to the Raleigh Convention Center, and we were very close to signing contracts to make that happen. And then, as you know, the world changed. Just like you, we've had to adjust our thinking about many things, including how to deliver a conference of this size. A virtual statewide conference is really not something we had ever considered, because I have a belief, and I think others do too, that spending time together is really the key to great collaboration. So 1 year later, we've all become Zombies. The conference planning committee didn't want to have a hiccup in holding a statewide conference by canceling the 2021 conference entirely. The conference is a tradition in North Carolina, so we started looking at how to conduct a conference virtually. I'd like to give a special shout out to Rachel Patterson and the team of leaders at the North Carolina ARC Users Group. They didn't realize it at the time, but when they conducted their September 2020 event, they gave us a model and an excellent test case for successfully carrying out a virtual conference on a lean budget. After some discussion with Rachel and her team, and the positive feedback we received from their experience, we agreed to forge ahead in the virtual world with a somewhat limited event. With that as background, it's a pleasure to welcome almost 800 attendees and 30 exhibitors to this completely new platform for our conference. I would say that please bear with us because we're learning the ropes of the CVent Attendee Hub right along with you. Liz Foreman and the CMC and Associates team, our event management provider, has provided excellent instruction and support as we've prepared what you will see over the next 3 days. Next, I want to tell you a little bit more about who's attending this year. So I'll share my screen. And what better way to do it than with a couple of maps. So where are you originating from over the next 3 days? Well, the first map shows the North Carolina distribution using a heat map, which you're familiar with, I'm sure. So we see attendees from Cherokee County in the west, all the way to the town of Holden Beach along the Atlantic coast and many parts in between. The map shows concentrations, and you can see those clearly, concentrations around the Raleigh-Durham area, Winston-Salem and Greensboro, and the Charlotte area. So thank you, all of you in North Carolina, for being a part of this first virtual conference. I'd like to move on to the nationwide map, and it's been a tradition of the conference, honestly, to be able to attract people from other states to our conference, and that's no different this year. And as a matter of fact, it might be even more enhanced. We welcome all of you from other states to the gathering of our GIS community. We're glad you were able to find us, and we can see from the map that we have folks coming from California, Arizona, British Columbia, Utah, Minnesota, and on the East Coast, New York, New Jersey, as well as Maine, and in the Midwest, Ohio, and some other states. So we can also welcome, as we usually do, our friends across the borders in South Carolina and Tennessee and in Virginia. So thank all of you for being a part of this virtual event. We'll be anxious to hear your feedback when it's done. Next, I want to talk about what you'll see, hear, and experience over the next 3 days. The conference planning committee made a special effort to space the conference out to help us minimize Zoom fatigue, and I know you know what that means. based on the past year of your experience. Overall, we have about 90 speakers covering 72 sessions. And I'd like to especially thank Matthew McClam of my team, who is serving as program committee chair this year for the first time, and the first time in a virtual setting, of course. So thanks, Matthew. The next slide I would like to show is a capsule view of the conference over the next 3 days. So for Wednesday, today, we will start with sessions immediately after this opening plenary session. The demo theater will be open each of the 3 days, and you can see those times listed. And at the end of today, at 2:45, we will have special interest groups, and we have 4 of those: the educational group, the North Carolina Property Mappers Association, the North Carolina ARC Users Group, and the Wake Municipal Group. So that runs from 2:45 to 3:30. In terms of content across the 3 days, we have presentations from local, state, and federal government, as well as the private sector and the academic community, as usual with our conference. Those presentations are as varied as the landscape of North Carolina. We have many timely topics that you submitted and we accepted as part of the conference, including elections and redistricting, asset management, Next Gen 911, environmental and social justice, COVID-19 analytics, as well as several presentations regarding the progress and plans for the statewide framework data sets. On Thursday, tomorrow, we will begin at noon rather than in the morning, with sessions starting at 1 o'clock and wrapping up at 5 o'clock. We will have a couple of built-in breaks in the afternoon, just like we will this morning. The social and the poster session will kick off at 5 o'clock. You can join the social and view the posters from the My Events tab in the attendee hub. We will share a few words with everyone in the room together at 5 o'clock before going into the breakout rooms. Right now, we have 5 breakout rooms designated, and those are local government applications of GIS and success stories, transportation applications of GIS, citizen engagement tools and their utilization, environmental applications of GIS, and last but not least, elevation data, its availability and applications. Each breakout room will have a moderator to lead the discussion, but please come ready to chat and share your own thoughts and ideas. Begin thinking about which room you would like to join during the social. Also, if you would like to cover a topic that's not listed, contact Matthew McClam and we will set up another room for your interests. You can also vote for your top poster through the website and view those posters during the poster session. On Friday, the conference will start at 9 o'clock and will wrap up at 1 o'clock with a very brief wrap-up session where I'll give some summary thoughts about the conference and ask for your continuing support, not only of the conference, but GIS initiatives in North Carolina, and there are many, as you will hear this week. Before I close and introduce the first of two plenary speakers, I would like to ask you to do 3 things over the next 3 days. One is make connections with speakers and other attendees, despite the virtualness of this event. Share common interests and start growing those relationships. Number 2, consider the topics you learn about this week and share your views about what we can do as GIS professionals in North Carolina to advance our collective work in those areas. And number 3, give some thought to your role individually within the statewide GIS community. We are looking for more leaders, and I know among the 800 of you, there are leaders out there that have a role to play, a bigger role to play than maybe you're currently playing. So seriously consider what that will be. Thanks for making the conference a part of your early plans in 2021. We believe it's going to be a successful event, and we're looking forward to the experience and your feedback. Along those lines, be prepared to respond to a survey that will come out after the conference is over. We will be learning from this experience just like you will. And especially this year, I think it's important for you to complete the survey to give us your honest feedback about how it went for you. And that will help us decide to what extent virtual events are something we should pursue in the future. With that, I would like to transition to introduction of our plenary speakers. We have two true North Carolina leaders to help us kick off the conference today. Both the efforts of the North Carolina 911 Board and the North Carolina Broadband Infrastructure Office are extremely important to all North Carolinians. And these folks are making substantial use of GIS along the way. We're really fortunate, and I'm honored to have Pokey Harris, Executive Director of the 911 Board, to share her thoughts, and Jeff Sural, Director of the North Carolina Broadband Infrastructure Office, to share his thoughts with us. First, we will start with Pokey. Welcome, Pokey.
So, good morning, Tim. To say I'm honored to open your virtual conference would be an understatement. So, thank you for allowing me to share this spotlight, if you will, with my colleague, Jeff Sural. And thank you for noting the work and the efforts that we're doing here in North Carolina with CGIA. Tim will often laugh. When I first came to North Carolina, trying to say CGIA just did not roll off my tongue as easy as I wish it had. So I called it the 911 or the GIS office. So Tim, thank you so much for allowing me to continue to do that. What I want to speak with you about this morning is nothing technical. I want to share with you our thoughts, my thoughts, comments about the partnership that the 911 Board has with CGIA. As Tim noted in his opening comments, GIS is very paramount in the project for Next Generation 911 for all of 911 in North Carolina, as well as the broadband efforts. But we have a partnership, we, meaning the North Carolina 911 Board, has a partnership with CGIA that is very strong. Let me share with you just a moment about the 911 Board and who we are. The 911 Board is established in general statute here in North Carolina. It's a policy-making board, if you will, with the primary goal, primary charge or task of overseeing about $94 million in 911 service charges that are received annually. These service charges are then distributed to the 127 911 centers across North Carolina. Of course, 911 center being a public safety answering point, or a PSAP. You'll hear us use that term quite often. But the board is responsible for distribution of those funds back to the 911 centers. Also, we have a grants and statewide projects program. You'll hear me talk about that statewide project, throughout. Then we have our Next Generation 911 efforts and project, and I'll speak about that momentarily as well. Then we have a portion of our funding that is allowed to go back to our wireless 911 carriers through the CMRS cost recovery program. We also have a small percentage of that service charge that is allowed for our administrative fees for our 911 office. But as we're talking about statewide projects and NG 911, that's where our partnership with CGIA comes into play. See, Tim, after all this time, CGIA still does not roll off my tongue. But anyway, our partnership with CGIA started almost, well, a decade ago. Back in 2010, the imagery used for 911 response across the state was somewhat of a patchwork quilt of varying quality and availability. And so to rectify this, to ensure that each PSAP had consistent and up-to-date imagery product to use, the 911 Board initiated the very first statewide ortho imagery project. And again, that was in 2010. After that first project, the 911 Board adopted the business plan for ortho imagery that was developed by GICC, and that recommended a 4-year cycle with a quarter of the state being collected each year to ensure that imagery was refreshed and to capture any changes in the landscape. So over the last decade, the 911 Board has done 2 full cycles in addition to the original 2010 project, and the 3rd cycle starting in 2020. That equates to The program delivering over 60 terabytes of imagery, covering over 175,000 square miles. So that's a pretty strong partnership. And again, the 911 board, referencing the statewide projects, the 911 board did pay for this project, the Ortho Imagery project. We're very proud of this project and very excited to share this with all 100 jurisdictions across the state. So that partnership that began over a decade has only solidified and become more valuable over the years. I've been very excited to be part of that project for a little over 3 years now when I came to the 911 board. And that time when I came to the board, we were in the throes of our next generation 911 project, which began actually back in about 2015. Oh, let me back up just a moment. Hey, Matt, we do have a map showing our Ortho Imagery project. Do you mind displaying that for me just a moment, sir? Thank you. Thank you. I almost skipped over that. So as you can see, this is the efforts of what we have done and what we will be doing over the coming four-year cycle. We are excited about that. I recall as I was preparing for presentation today, I recalled the first meeting I walked into for the kickoff for the Ortho Imagery project. And folks were very excited and very elated about this. And that brought together and even more so solidified this partnership that we had an actual deliverable, a tangible deliverable that we could provide to our jurisdiction. So we were very excited about that. Matt, thank you. And sorry, I almost passed over that one. So as this partnership has gone on, and I came to the 911 board back in 2017, but even prior to that, in about 2015, the 911 board moved earnestly ahead for its next generation 911 project. So what is next generation 911? What we're doing is we're moving from an old, antiquated networks of systems for 911 calls to traverse on networks and equipment that, as of yesterday, we celebrated 53 years of 911 calls. The first 911 call was made yesterday, was made 53 years ago yesterday in Haleyville, Alabama. And that same network is in place today. So next generation 911 puts into place an IP network, if you will, for 911 calls to traverse. This allows us to keep up with the demands of consumers in an IP or digital world. Now we can send not only voice, but data, video, all of those things that are associated with a person living their life, and particularly when things happen in that person's life from an emergency perspective. So in 2015, the board moved forward with implementing Next Gen 911 here in North Carolina. Very happy to say that as we move forward for the concept came to fruition as to how we would deliver this. And we entered into a contractual agreement with AT&T to provide the Emergency Services Internet Protocol Network, or ESInet, that 911 calls will traverse here in the state. It's a closed private network that only 911 calls will go to the 127 PSAPs that I've referenced, plus our military partners, our highway patrol partners, emergency management partners. So that's a closed private network that only 911 calls will traverse. So as we move forward with that project, very happy to say that in November of 2018, the very first 911 call was received by Durham 911 across the ESInet. However, in parallel to that, geospatial call routing is very paramount and very important. In order to accomplish that, in 2018, we began looking earnestly at implementing the geospatial call routing portion of this. What that entails is making sure that we have a statewide data set that provides all of the information from various data sets of road center lines, address points, PSAP boundaries, emergency services boundaries, and provisioning boundaries. So we contracted with a firm called Geocom, and I'm sure most of you on this call know Geocom. But on their public safety side, we were very fortunate to bring them in to work on our NG911 project, bringing the tools and processes that they have in place to do that. They have a tool called Data Hub, and then they have a very defined process for capturing the data from those local jurisdictions or the GIS authorities to bring that data into one local repository, if you will, so that data can be validated, then it can be processed, if you will, so then that it can provide the geospatial call routing for a particular 911 call. However, there was a piece missing to what GeoComm could bring to the table, and that piece was the outreach that we needed to the 911 centers, to the 100 jurisdictions, so that we could create that statewide data set. So Tim and I began to have discussion, and through a wonderful MOU that we have, Tim allowed us, the 911 board, to utilize 2 of his staff members, Matt McLean, that he's already mentioned, Matt, who is the Assistant Director for CGIA, and Anna Verrill, who serves as the Senior GIS Analyst for CGIA, became part of our NG 911 project. Their task was to do liaison work, to be the liaison and the outreach to all 100 jurisdictions through the PSAP, the Public Safety Answering Point, to assist with capturing and gathering all of that data, GIS data, into one statewide data set. So their partnership with our staff here at the 911 office, that includes our 4 911 regional coordinators, our NG 911 network engineer that you'll meet later in the conference, as well as our GeoComm partners, we have been able to work with all 100 jurisdictions, capture their data. The data has been uploaded, if you will, into the data hub that I referenced for GeoComm, so that we can begin the normalization and standardization of all of their data that has to reach a 98% accuracy rate in order for it to be successful for the geospatial call routing of the 911 calls. This partnership, I will say, has been one that has been a pleasure. Tim's team has been amazing to work with, and as we've gone through, beginning in June of 2019 for this partnership, Anna and Matt have been very involved and engaged, as I said, with regional meetings, statewide meetings, and even one-on-one meetings with the representatives from each of the 100 jurisdictions as needed. So we have been very pleased with this partnership. Also, what they have helped to create on our website are 2 very informational pages. And I'm going to attempt to share, so let's see if I can do this. And if not, I've got Matt's waiting in the background to help me if need be, but I'm going to go ahead and share just a little bit of information to show you what our partnership has created. So hang tight, and let's hope we can do this. So I do believe that you should be seeing one of our pages, which provides information about Next Generation 911. I encourage you to go to the page to look at that, to get more information about what we're doing here in North Carolina. Also, one of the things that CGIA has developed for us is a live map. This live map has been touted all across the country by various individuals from North Carolina, the North Carolina 911 Board. Even the chair of the North Carolina 911 Board has presented this at many conferences that he's been to. But this just gives you a live representation of where we are with our Next Gen 911 project. And thank you to Tim's team for creating this. Then also, more specific to the GIS services that are being provided, they have developed this very, very informational page that any PSAP manager, county manager, GIS manager, whomever is involved with the jurisdiction, with their 911 GIS efforts, can go here and they can retrieve any information about this that they need. Also, they have created multiple documents, help guides, for PSAP managers, for GIS folks, third-party vendors, whomever, to help them with this GIS effort, next-gen GIS effort. And of course, it would not be complete without another map for the representation of what we have accomplished here in North Carolina with our GIS project thus far. I won't get into the technical aspects of this because I know that Matt and Anna do have a presentation planned, but what I wanted to share with you today is the partnership that the North Carolina 911 Board, my staff, me personally, I have with Tim and all of the folks over at CGIA. Their efforts have been phenomenal. Without them, we would not be as successful as we have been with our GIS efforts here in North Carolina from a North Carolina 911 board perspective. So thank you very much, Tim, for allowing me to come and join and to be part of the opening. And now my colleague, Jeff Sural, will share some thoughts from the Broadband Office.
Great. Thank you, Pokey. Great to be with you all this morning. Thank you, Tim, for inviting me to speak this morning at the opening session. One of the things that we've been working on in our world, the broadband infrastructure world here in North Carolina, is data analysis and mapping. It's key to everything that we do, from policy recommendations to directing funding. So my office is a small office within the Department of Information Technology. So Tim and Pokey and I all work for the same department. And like Pokey, I had trouble rolling CGIA off my tongue. So I was less gracious and simply called Tim and his crew the mapping geeks. But in in the definition of geek in 2020, not 1985, of course. So it was with all due respect. He's really got a great team there. They do a phenomenal job. And we actually share cube space. So we're all on the same floor, which makes it a nice collegial atmosphere. Unfortunately for Tim, he sits only a few feet away from me. But we enjoy and have enjoyed a great relationship over the years. One of the first things that I did when I came on board was to say, listen, we need a plan for the state. How are we going to make sure that all North Carolinians have affordable, reliable broadband access? And we had to, one of the key parts of that plan was to collect better data and map that data so that we could identify those locations where broadband service and access was lacking. So we've been at this for a number of years, and in fact, this is simply some work that is kind of carried on from some federal mapping initiatives that started back in 2010, and you'll hear from a colleague of mine later this week, Angie Bailey, who was involved with that effort here at the state level and helped create some of the first broadband coverage maps that the state used. Unfortunately, that initiative, after the funding ended from the federal government, that initiative also ended. So in some respects, we had to start anew. But Angie is a real expert in this area, and I think she's going to get into in a little bit more detail some of what I'm going to cover today and kind of show you all, which I think are some of the, I've got 2 or 3 maps I'm going to show you that I think exemplify sort of the creativity and the innovative approach that Tim's team has taken towards trying to identify where folks in our state are lacking broadband access. There are mapping initiatives going on in almost every state around the country. Some are legislatively mandated and have been funded. Ours is simply taking out of pocket, and we're trying to be as creative as we can with very little resources and funding. But just recently, which is interesting, Congress just passed the Data Collection Act and instructed the Federal Communications Commission, which now collects the data from the internet service providers around the country and then reports that data, maps that data, and that's where we draw a lot of the information on service areas and coverage areas for North Carolina. But that data that has been collected through what they call Form 477 tends not to be as granular as we need it to be. So some of our efforts here at the state level have been to find ways to identify those unserved locations using other data sources or parsing the data that is available from the FCC. Now, I mentioned the Congressional Act, and that's going to greatly improve the data collection initiatives and efforts by the FCC But it was an unfunded mandate. And just recently, at the end of last year, when Congress passed its appropriations bill, it did include significant funding for the FCC, and it also included some significant funding for the National Telecommunications Information Administration and their mapping initiative called NBAM that Tim's team is very familiar with. And so in the future, we see the data collection and the mapping around broadband infrastructure greatly improving, which is a good thing because, again, going back, we're not just creating maps to create pretty maps, although they are pretty. We're creating them to make sure that we're directing limited resources and funding to where those resources need to go. And we're also trying to work through different policy initiatives to make sure that our policy initiatives are targeted toward a specific objective, and certainly the data and the mapping helps in that regard. So there are a number of things that CGIA has helped us with. We create maps almost every day for folks. We get requests around the state, and we try to do what we can with the data. However, I'm just going to show you just a couple pieces of the work that we do with CGIA, and I hope this is illustrative of the creativity and how we're trying to go about figuring out where all these unserved areas are. So the first map I'm going to show you is because we run a grant program. We have a map that Ben Shelton and Elizabeth Daniel and Matt helped us create that would help our applicants identify the areas where our rural broadband grant fund can go. So these are the eligible areas. Now, what we've done is added to this map the areas where we've already funded or where federal funds are being directed. So, for example, this map, I know looks a little busy to you when we're looking at it from a distance here, but these are all of the grant funded projects that are ongoing in North Carolina at this time. I'm going to pick one county in particular. You can come up here, you can pick by the provider or the applicant, the counties. But one of the things that we did, because we were struggling with making sure that we were getting the project areas defined as specifically as possible, we weren't just going to fund census block areas that the FCC said were unserved. We wanted to go after other areas that may show as having service on the FCC map or in their data, but may not be actually served. So what we did was, with the help of CGIA, was we created this map. The red areas you see here indicate areas where the FCC says there's no service, and then these dots here in the other colored areas show where some grant funding is going. But what's interesting is what we tried to do was plot exactly where the applicant said they wanted to serve. So I'm showing you here an application and an award that was granted to Atlantic Telephone Membership Corporation down in Brunswick County. And what you're seeing here is, as I scroll in, all these purple triangles are where the applicant said we wanted to serve. Now, what is kind of unique about this map and what we did differently this time around, which was incredibly helpful to the administration of their program, is if you see these yellow dots here, that's from the North Carolina 2014 master address list. So one of the things that we're doing is piggybacking off of good work that CGIA is doing for Pokey and updating that master address list so that we know where all the locations in North Carolina are. So all these are addresses here. And what we did in a different map is to create a tool that allows the applicant to draw an area or polygon to select a particular set of yellow dots. And then that would show over here on your left-hand side, it would give them how many are in an area that's under 10.1, 10 megabits per second download speed, 1 up, or 25.3, which are the speed thresholds that the grant program uses to determine or define unserved areas. And so this was incredibly helpful for our applicants, because they, instead of listing out a bunch of addresses and then us having to go back and double check to see whether they were eligible or not, we could simply draw this polygon, and then the data would show, display, and then you could download that data. So then we would get the address points in their application. And so everyone was required to use this tool. Now, our grant program includes a time period during which a provider, an internet service provider, can say, hey, listen, I see that an applicant has applied for this area, but actually we already serve that area. And so we're going to protest this application. And so we required the protesters to come in and use the same tool. And if you see here, the purple triangles are the applicant, the black round or the black square imposed over those purple triangles indicate where a protest was filed against this area. So as you can see, one of the things that we've struggled with is, well, according to the FCC data, this area is served, but the applicant has filed an application saying it's unserved and eligible for great grant funding. And another internet service provider came in and said, no, it's served, we serve it, we're going to protest. Now it's our job to figure out, based on the data that's available, who's correct, who's incorrect, and how we go about doing that. Now, you know, the simple thing would be, well, we could drive over there, right? Well, North Carolina is a big state, and we had 71 applications in the last round. So it was impossible for us to put eyes on all of these projects. Now, so what we did was we had to weigh and balance all of the evidence that was submitted by both parties. But this tool was incredibly helpful in allowing us to make certain decisions, tough decisions. The next map I'm going to show you is a result of this problem that we have here, going, well, who's right, who's wrong? What other data could we add to this map to better inform us about what's going on the ground? So with the help of the Friday Institute over at North Carolina State University and CGIA, we created a crowdsourcing tool. So we had a survey that we would use in communities that were trying to better the broadband situation in their areas. And but one of the things that we found with some of the speed tests that were available out in the open market was that they weren't as accurate as we'd like them to be, or if they were accurate, we had to pay a lot of money to access the data. So we created our own speed tool. We combined it with a survey, and it lives on our website, ncbroadband.gov. And people can go in, and it takes less than 5 minutes to answer a few questions. And then you take a speed test, and not only do you get, you know, an accurate speed test for your location, but we get the data. The data comes back automatically to our servers, and then this map here that you're seeing is updated every night. And so, as you can see on the top right-hand corner, total survey responses 44.8K. So we have almost 45,000 people across the state that have responded to the survey and speed test. If you look down below that box, we can see how many of them are reporting that they do not have a wireline internet service available. If you go across the screen, across the map to the other side, on the left-hand side, the middle box says primary reason for no internet. And this is incredibly helpful to us, because now we can see, okay, why don't you have internet access? If you do have it, why don't you have it? We can also see, and we've color-coded the map to show us where people are getting, where they have no internet, which is a red dot, or whether maybe they have internet that's under 25.3, or maybe they've even indicated that, hey, I'm under 25.3, but that's all I can get. That's all the internet service provider will allow me to sign up for. So again, this is a combining this tool, and I'll show you in a little more detail in a second. We'll go down and scroll down to a county. We're combining this tool with the tool and the map that I just showed you, we were able to overlay these data points onto that map and say, okay, well, listen, sure, that area that we had just showed you or that we're looking at says it's served, but when we look back at our crowdsourcing map, we can see that there are some actually locations that are not served. Applicants also submitted testimonials or statements from those residents saying, listen, we've called the company, they just won't come out. I'm going to show you kind of a scroll in a particular county here to show you why this crowdsourcing tool is incredibly important to our work. So as you can see, this is a county in North Carolina, Chatham County. Chatham is located just east of Wake County, one of the most populous counties in the state. If you're not familiar with North Carolina, we actually have the second largest population of folks living in rural areas, Texas being first. We might be first. They're actually frozen now, so we'll see how that works out. But I show you this because this is actually a very populous part of the state around Jordan Lake here and in this region here. And so naturally you would think, well, because it's an urban area and because there are, it's a higher income area, you're going to get a lot of good service. You're going to have a lot of options for internet service in this area. But what we were finding, which is interesting, is that Chatham County, which is a bit more rural, is struggling with robust, affordable internet service. And as you see here, many of these red dots, these red polygons, which are census blocks, are FCC data saying, hey, listen, you don't have service here, but across the lake, you should have all the service you need here. But what we're finding is with this crowdsourcing tool that they don't. So we can see a lot of orange, red, yellow dots, which is showing us that there aren't a lot of, there's not a lot of robust infrastructure delivering high-speed internet access. So the neat thing about this tool is you can click on one of those dots just to see what's going on. You can get the location of the home. It's geolocated. You can find out the provider who's providing it. You can find out what service level they're getting. Now we did mask to some extent the actual speeds, but we used zeros and ones to show us, well, what were they getting? So they were not getting 25.3, they were getting 10.1, but 25.3 was the fastest that they can't sign up for 25.3 is what they're telling us in a survey. So incredibly helpful when we're looking at where we should be directing funding as a state or with federal grant opportunities. So the information is the other neat thing about it is it's downloadable. So anyone can go in to this map or to our dashboard on our website, ncbroadband.gov, and you can download this data for your particular county or region or area. We wanted to do that because we wanted to create an incentive for counties and other local governments to distribute the survey. And in Chatham County, they actually included some marketing materials that we had come up with in their utility bills when they sent those out. And we got an uptick of responses from Chatham County. It really allows people to speak out and gives them a voice to be heard. And we did, now you're probably thinking to yourself, yeah, but if you don't have internet service, how are you going to take it? Well, we thought about that too. So we created a phone number. So you can either text or call in your answer. And typically what we tell you in the instructions is only use this phone number if you do not have service. If you do not have internet service, then just simply call in or text in your address and we'll put you down as a red dot. And then we'll have that information. We also translate it into Spanish. So both on the website and on the phone, it's available in Spanish. So trying to branch out and make sure that the tool is versatile and is accessible by folks everywhere. So that's one way that we're trying to collect more data. Another way that we're trying to parse data, and I think I mentioned maybe I'd show you 2 maps, but because it's you all, you get a bonus 3rd map that we created with CGIA that's kind of neat to see. One of the big problems that we have, in addition to the access problem, people just not having the wires or the signals that go to their home, is an adoption problem, what we call adoption. And that's that people aren't subscribing to an internet service. So what we did was we partnered and hired a researcher out of Purdue University that does this type of work on the national level. And we asked him to build us a model, an index, we call it, to determine or at least predict in some way where we have problems in North Carolina around both adoption and availability. Now, availability, you could say, well, it's just, it's the infrastructure or the speed thresholds. The adoption piece is much more difficult to parse. So what we did was we used different data sources, Census Bureau, FCC, and a few others, to determine where the likely trouble spots are in North Carolina regarding adoption. From past studies and from national studies that have been done, we understand that the largest barrier to folks signing up for internet subscription is affordability. So it's the cost of the service. But there are other factors. And so we wanted to try to diagnose as specifically as possible what those factors are. So this map here will show you how we weighed all of these different factors. The dials are on the left and the right, kind of give you the formula, what went into the equation to develop this map. And then we have these, we've broken it down into census tracts or into counties, aggregated at the county level, because that's the level of data that we had. So I'm just going to go back here real quickly. You can search by county. Also, I'm going to go back here to Chatham, just to give you an idea of what we're looking at in Chatham County. So the red areas obviously are indicating, these census tracts are indicating these are the problem areas in the state, in the county, with the adoption piece. If you click on the census, you get this pop-up, nice pop-up, and then it gives you some the specific data for this particular census tract. So we can look here in this pop-up box, and it gives us a better idea of, okay, what's going on here. What may be the problem? Is it the poverty rate? Is it the broadband subscription rate, which we see here is pretty low? A lot of times we look at the population of ages 65 and over because they are low adopters traditionally. So this is a really great diagnostic tool for communities around the state to better determine what's going on in their communities and which part of their communities, because really, as you saw from some of the other maps that I displayed, there can be robust and affordable broadband with lots of competition in one part of the county, but in another part of the county, all of that is completely lacking. So you really have to go in and have granular data to determine what is actually going on in a particular community or a part of the community. So I will stop there and just wrap up by saying that, again, the mapping and the data analysis is incredibly important to the work that we do around broadband. It is nationally, it is for every state. I meet with state broadband leaders monthly, meet with the folks at the federal level that are doing this. And this is a topic of discussion every time we meet, because if we don't have good data, we don't know where folks are not getting broadband internet service, then we can't direct the funding or the resources there. And we can't craft the specific policies to address this issue. So thank you again, Tim, for having me, and we really appreciate and value our partnership with your team, CGIA, and we look forward to continuing this journey of creating more specific maps and solving the broadband problem in North Carolina. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, Pokey, for your remarks. I think both of these folks have illustrated how important it is to have great data, not something that is news to us, but certainly great data to support policy issues in the case of the broadband issue, and to support actions related to emergency response and the 911 board issue. So the GIS community as a whole really contributes to both of these efforts, and I'm very proud to be a part of that community. I hope you are too. So we have about 9 minutes before the 10 o'clock session starts. So I would ask you to get ready for that next session and link your way to your session of choice. And thank you for being a part of this opening session of the first virtual North Carolina GIS conference. Enjoy the rest of the event, folks. Thanks.